We used to throw a fit every time my parents would say, all right, it's time to go to confession. People would run away. People would try to get out of the house. People would kick and scream. It would just be a total nightmare on our way to get to the church for confession. Each and every time. You would think there would be a holier story to our times going to confession, but that's basically it. It was a lot of screaming and yelling and how dare you, and I don't need to do that. And that's about how we got on our way to confession. As a priest, if you bring up the topic of confession, you'll hear usually three very quick responses. The first and the most popular one is, Father, I had a terrible experience with confession about 25 years ago, and I just can't ever go back. The second is, I live my life according to my set of rules, and therefore, as a good person, which I am, I live not hurting anyone else, or try not to, and therefore, I don't need confession because I'm a good person. And the last one is, well, I do ask for forgiveness, but I do it on my own terms in my own prayer life. Let's unpack all of these. First, let's look at the first one. Every single person, I think, has had some experience of an unfortunate confession experience, myself included. To dwell on that and to keep ourselves from the sacrament is a great disservice to our own spiritual life and our soul. When we go to confession, we focus on what we did wrong, what people will think, what people will say, what will the priest do, what will the priest say? Will he yell at me again? Will he tell me I'm a terrible person? Will he not forgive my sins? And we have all this fear and trepidation when we walk into the confessional. Remember this, that it is in the moment of confession that it is to be gentle. It is supposed to be healing. And it is supposed to be one of forgiveness and peace, not of fear and anxiety. Yes, we try to live a better life when we leave confession, that we try to sin no more. But we know on this side of heaven that everything is imperfect and we will ultimately fall again. But when we ask for that sacramental grace within our confession, to ask to sin no more and to avoid whatever leads us to sin, we leave with that firm purpose of amendment to live our lives better than when we walked in that door. And so therefore we have that resolve to live that good holy life. Let's look at the second one. Everyone that thinks that going to confession means you're a terrible person needs to relook at that question. We are not bad people. God created us in His image and likeness. And so therefore, by that very fact, we are created good. However, because again, we live in this imperfect world, in our fallen state, we are weak and we sin. And therefore, we need this sacramental grace to be forgiven by God for the transgressions that we have made against Him and against our neighbor, so that we can continually sanctify our souls, so that we can continue on the path to Him. It does not mean that we are bad people when we go to confession. It does not mean that people look down on us because we go to confession. It does not mean that the priest is sitting there going, oh, I wonder what happened this time. Not at all. We are here in this moment to go to confession, to sanctify our lives, to beg for forgiveness, and to leave that confessional with that firm purpose of amendment to live our lives far better than we ever have before. The last one that people often say is that I ask God for forgiveness in my own prayers and on my own time. In order for us to receive the sacramental grace, in order for us to truly have our sins forgiven, as Jesus said to His apostles in the scriptures, we need to do that. We need to enter into that sacramental moment through the church, who dispenses the sacraments and their graces. And therefore, we need to enter into that moment with the priest, who acts as the bridge between God and the penitent, and to receive that forgiveness and mercy. And therefore, that grace that we receive is one that we can't on our own receive. But it is through the church in which Christ established for our salvation that we utilize these great sacraments. And a final word on confession. There is fear, there is anxiety about naming what it is that we struggle with. And oftentimes we struggle with the same thing over and over again, and we get discouraged. And we think, what is the point? Always remember that the devil sows seeds of discouragement. Christ is our hope. Christ is our strength. The more we ask for that sacramental grace in the sacrament, the more we ask to be forgiven, the better we will be. The more that God will work through our brokenness and make us whole again in the way that He intended us to be. Never be afraid of confession. Never be afraid of this moment. Never be afraid to ask God for mercy and forgiveness. Because when we do so with a contrite heart and we walk out ready to live our lives anew, He gives us that sanctifying grace that we can live the life of a saint that He's called us to be. And that is the sacrament of confession.